You didn't forget about it. You thought about it every single day. You set reminders, you made lists, you told yourself, tomorrow, tomorrow for certain. And then tomorrow came, and you found something else to do, something easier, something that didn't ask anything of you. And the worst part isn't that you didn't do it. The worst part is that you knew. The whole time you knew. Most people think procrastination is about laziness, about discipline, about not caring enough. But you do care. That's the thing no one talks about. You care so much it hurts. You lie in bed at night running through everything you should have done. You feel the weight of it in your chest before you even open your eyes in the morning. You're not unmotivated. You're something else entirely. And there's a reason for that. Not an excuse, a reason. Something buried deep in how your brain was wired long before you ever had a deadline to miss. Something that explains why the more important something is to you, the harder it becomes to start. But here's what no one tells you about procrastination. It's not a time management problem. It never was. Think about the last time you really needed to do something, something that mattered. Maybe it was a project, a conversation you kept putting off, a dream you kept circling but never landed on. You opened the laptop, you sat down, you were ready, and then nothing. You checked your phone, made coffee, reorganized something that didn't need reorganizing. An hour passed, then 2, and by the time you came back to the task, something had shifted. The energy was gone, the moment had closed. You told yourself you'd lost motivation, that you just weren't in the right headspace. But here's what was actually happening inside your brain. The moment you approached that task, your nervous system flagged it as not important, as dangerous. Your amygdala, the part of your brain that handles threat detection, lit up the same way it would if something was physically coming at you. The task wasn't a task anymore. It was a threat. And your brain did what it always does when something feels threatening. It pulled you away. It gave you relief, dopamine release, tension resolved, threat avoided. You didn't procrastinate, you escaped. Here's what that escape looks like in practice. You open Instagram instead of the document, and it feels better immediately. Not because Instagram is better, because it's safe. It asks nothing of you. It doesn't judge your output. It doesn't measure your worth. The task does. That's the part you didn't notice. Every time you sit down to do something important, your brain performs a quiet calculation. What happens if I do this badly? What does that mean about me? And if the answer feels even slightly dangerous, if the task carries any weight of identity, any risk of failure, any chance that doing it poorly means something about your intelligence, your worth, your potential, your brain will find a way out, every time. This is called self-protective avoidance, and it's not weakness, it's sophisticated. It's your mind running damage control on a threat it isn't sure you can survive. But survival mode doesn't build anything. It just keeps you safe in a smaller and smaller world. There's another layer to this. You've probably noticed that you work better under pressure. Deadlines arrive, and suddenly you're capable. Hours of work compressed into minutes. The thing you couldn't start for 3 weeks gets done the night before. You might have decided this means you need pressure to function, that you're just built differently, that urgency is your trigger. But that's not what's actually happening. When a deadline becomes real and immediate, the threat calculation changes. Now the danger of not doing it outweighs the danger of doing it badly. Failure is no longer abstract, it's imminent. And suddenly, the fear that was keeping you stuck becomes the fear that gets you moving. You didn't procrastinate, you became more afraid of the right thing. And here's where it gets darker. Because every time you wait for that pressure, every time you prove to yourself that you only perform at the last minute, you reinforce a story. A story that says you can't trust yourself, that you need to be forced, that left alone, you fall apart. And stories like that have a way of becoming self-fulfilling. Let's go somewhere most people don't look. Childhood. Not in a dramatic way, no sweeping trauma required, just the quiet, ordinary moments that shaped how you relate to effort, to performance, to being seen doing something difficult. Were you praised for being smart, for natural ability, for how quickly you picked things up? That sounds like a good thing. It isn't. When a child is consistently praised for being smart rather than for trying hard, something subtle but devastating happens. The child starts to equate intelligence with effortlessness. If you're truly smart, things should come easily. If something is hard, maybe you're not as smart as they thought. So what does a child do with a difficult task? They avoid it, because trying and failing is worse than not trying at all. At least if you don't try, you have an excuse. You can tell yourself and everyone else that you could have done it if you'd really wanted to. The potential stays intact. The identity stays safe. You've been protecting that potential ever since. But protected potential is just another name for a life unlived. Here's the part that's harder to say out loud. Some of you aren't afraid of failing. You're afraid of succeeding. That sounds backwards. It sounds like something a self-help book says to make you feel less bad, but follow it for a moment. Success changes things. Success creates expectations. Once you've done the thing, once you've proven you can, now you have to keep proving it. Now people know what you're capable of. Now there's no hiding behind potential. Now you actually have to be the person you've been pretending to be. And what if you can't sustain it? What if the first success was a fluke and everything after is just a long, slow exposure of that fact? Your brain ran that calculation too, before you were even conscious of it. And somewhere in that dark, quiet arithmetic, it decided better not to start. Better to stay where expectations are low. Better to be the person who almost did something than the person who tried and showed the world exactly how much was really there. Procrastination gave you a story, one where you're always just about to become who you're supposed to be. But about isn't there. About is still safe. Now, stop. Because everything you've heard so far, the fear, the escape, the self-protection, points to one conclusion that most people never actually reach. Procrastination isn't a failure of willpower. It's a failure of emotional safety. You don't procrastinate on things that feel safe to fail at. You don't avoid low-stakes tasks. You don't scroll for hours instead of doing something you genuinely don't care about. You procrastinate on the things that matter, on the work that carries your name, your identity, your hope. The avoidance is proportional to the meaning. Let that settle. The more it means to you, the harder it is to begin. Not because you don't want it, because you want it so badly that the idea of approaching it and still falling short feels like something you might not recover from. And your brain, brilliant, ruthless, survival-obsessed, decided long ago that it would rather keep you frozen than let you find out what was underneath. So where does that leave you?